welcome to Polycon 18.
Great to be here.
Let people know your full name, your title, and what you're best known for in the blockchain industry.
Sure. So my name is Michael Terpin. I'm founder and CEO of Transform Group. I also founded Bid Angels, and probably best known for, I think CNBC called me the godfather of the ICO. I did the first ICO, my firm did, and I've either invested or done the PR and marketing for 75 ICOs, including Ethereum, Augur, advisor to Polymath, and most of the Chinese ICOs, Quantum, Neo.
Well, great history there. In one line, can you say something about Polymath?
Sure. What I like about Polymath is it's a real forward-looking innovation in being able to have an infrastructure. And if you look at the top 20 tokens, I mean, they're almost all infrastructure coins. Infrastructure coins are really necessary to build things on top of. And everyone knows that security tokens are going to be giant in the future, really disrupting and replacing the current way that equity goes public. And this provides a utility token-based model for being able to take securities and have everything encoded into a token that can be then replicated and go from one stock market to the next.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your involvement with Polymath?
Sure. So Trevor told me about Polymath from the beginning as he was evolving the idea, and I, hopefully with some help steering him in different directions. And I was very much encouraging of the direction that he ended up with. Basically, I'm an advisor and an investor in Polymath. As you can see, some of the biggest names in the industry are the same.
For sure. How do you think the security token market is going to disrupt the cryptocurrency space?
So I don't think it's so much going to disrupt the cryptocurrency space as the legacy systems for public equity, which is trillions of dollars, and has not really had a fundamental reboot since the 1930s after the Great Depression, when they instituted the 33 and the 34 Act and tried to go and say, hey, we don't want people selling stock on street corners. We want to have it in regulated exchanges. And it has not really been substantially updated for television, much less for the internet, and it certainly has not factored in the blockchain. And so you still have these quirky things like people in the United States don't actually own their stock. It's owned by this thing called the DTCC that essentially lets you use it and sell it when you want to, but in the meantime, they're the ones that hold it, and it takes 3 days to process something, and that's a ridiculous concept when you understand what the blockchain is, and that's what T0, who Polymath works with, and other entities have realized that with a blockchain, you're actually able to possess your own stock. Instead of like a bar of gold, and instead of having these wild intermediaries in between you. And I think what it's going to do is, one by one, you're going to have forward-thinking stock markets come forward and say, just as they did in the late 1990s, and they said, oh, we need to go and build something new for the innovation springing out of the internet. They're going to say, we need to have not just the Vancouver Exchange or the Toronto Exchange or the Frankfurt Exchange, but we need to have the Frankfurt Exchange, Token X or whatever. And Gibraltar is already starting to move in that direction.
Okay.
And so I think that that's really what's going to be different, because a tokenized exchange, even though you're still going to follow whatever the relevant securities laws are of that jurisdiction, are going to make it much easier to go and trade among multiple jurisdictions. Today, if you want to buy Samsung stock, you have to get an ADR, and it's just very archaic. Here, if you've got a token that says, we're tradable in these 3, 4, 5 exchanges venues, you can just program that in. I mean, it's programmable currency, it's programmable equity.
You mentioned very early on about your involvement with ICOs, being one of the first ones, and the amount of ICOs that you've been involved with. What do you think the future of ICOs are, regardless of whether they're a security or regardless of whether they're a utility? And why do you think that?
Sure. So I think that there has to at some point be further clarity. And decisions have to be made. We're in a period right now of uncertainty because some jurisdictions like Korea and China just woke up and said, whoa, what exploded right in front of us? We have to figure out what to do about it. And so they, nobody said, we're shutting it down, get out of our country, we're never going to deal with you again. They said, we have to sort of like, slow down, see where we can put in regulation that makes sense. And I think that most jurisdictions will put in regulation that makes sense, or they'll do what you have for the stock market, which eventually ended up having regulation, but they also end up having self-regulatory groups. There is a group right now called Data that's just starting out that is kind of spun off of the Wyoming initiatives in the United States markets, where the state of Wyoming went and said, okay, the SEC is just being very vague. And the way that laws work is first is federal regulation, then a state regulation, then the SEC. If there's no regulation, they have to interpret the lack of regulation. But if you're in Wyoming and you've actually had a legislature pass that, the SEC can't undo that. They can use it as guidance for something else, but they can't go and overthrow. That has to be the federal legislation. And that's why you have things like, marijuana is legal in certain states and illegal in other states. And, and I think for the most part, when you have clarity, you're then going to have utility tokens not have to pretend they're securities. Securities should be what they are, something where you're buying a piece of an enterprise. And tokens should be what they are, utility tokens, which is you are providing utility, whether it's in the form of software or services that are tokenized. And they'll probably get a third or fourth asset class in terms of, when something is a tokenized asset like real estate or gold or whatever, is probably going to be yet another one. And then payment systems, which ones are going to be under the money transmitter laws and which ones aren't. So I think you're going to have clarity as the regulators in various jurisdictions understand all the components that they're being asked to regulate or not regulate, and that's just golden for Polymath.
Last question. How do you think securities on the blockchain will change finance and Wall Street?
Well, I think Wall Street will be, in many ways, an anachronism. That's like saying, how did Kickstarter change Silicon Valley? Took a lot of the power away. And so, 100 years ago, you had to go to Wall Street, and that was the center of the world. And then maybe London was another center, and they didn't really talk to each other. And, then you ended up having a world where you have ADRs where you can actually buy a Korean stock through your stockbroker. Then you could buy it through an online exchange. Now, if you've got a digital wallet, you should be able to buy anything in the world that has a tokenized form. And I believe you're going to have first, tokenized securities that start out that way. And then you're going to have, the biggest stocks in the world say, wait, we're missing out on this. We should go and have a tokenized format for you to be able to go and, buy and sell and, have rewards and have all the programmable things you can for IBM stock.
Absolutely amazing insights. Thank you so much.
All right, my
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.